Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. Forrester study finds 40 to 48% ROI for Tulip's Frontline operations platform. Today, I'm joined by our two speakers, Jason and Nikoletta. Jason Dietrich is the head of commercial operations here at Tulip and has over 20 years of experience in B2B sales leadership for MES, IoT, and industrial edge computing. Nikoletta is a consultant at Forrester, and she's on the Forrester's Total Economic Impact team, who interviewed several of Tulip's customers and discovered the findings that she'll be sharing here today. The webinar is broken up into three parts. First, we'll hear from Jason as he talks through why the promise of Industry 4.0 hasn't panned out as expected and why it is critical to focus on worker augmentation. Then we'll hear from Nikoletta, who will take us through the Total Economic Impact study. And then we'll go back to Jason, who will talk a little bit more about Tulip and the technology and approach that enables much of this value that is produced. I will now hand it over to Jason.
Thanks, Jen, and welcome everybody. We certainly appreciate your time and taking the time to join this webinar. In the first section, as Jen noted, we're going to talk about why it's time to embrace worker augmentation and why the human is so central to manufacturing and operational settings. And I'm going to start with talking about Industry 4.0 and kind of why that hasn't panned out and what the expectations were and what the reality is. So let's start with 2015 expectation, kind of the peak of hype relative to Industry 4.0 being discussed at World Economic Forum at that point in time. And the idea at that point in time was we'd have lights out factories or lights out manufacturing. The idea that automation would solve all problems and the human would no longer be necessary in a manufacturing setting. The reality of 2023, as we sit here today, is many manufacturers are still very paper-based. They are still doing things with limited automation, or maybe full automation wasn't relevant to their facility. And we actually have a shortage of workers. So not only are we still leveraging humans, we're still leveraging paper-based solutions. We actually have a shortage of those humans and therefore the need to really focus on the ones we do have and make them as productive as possible. When Industry 4.0 was first talked about, it was really focused on disruptive technology, and that would drive change in manufacturing. And the question that was posed and was trying to be answered was, what does the future look like with all these new technologies? And everyone focused on buzzwords and new disruptive technologies that were going to change the way we do things. Internet of Things, cloud computing, artificial intelligence and machine learning, digital twin. Later on in this journey, augmented reality came into the manufacturing setting, autonomous robots, additive manufacturing, and so on. All of these disruptive technologies were themes or ways that companies were thinking about changing the way they manufactured. But in reality, in the past, any industrial revolution was really made by the fact that people figured out how to change manufacturing and they used technology to enable it. It wasn't, let's take this disruptive technology and we're going to figure out how we're going to change what we do. It's how do we improve the way we manufacture and let technology enable us. So in the discussion around Industry 4.0 and all the thought that was going around full automation, the thing that we believe was left out of those discussions was the human, the person who executes tasks, who builds materials, builds goods and services, and so on. And there are four questions that we think, were not really discussed or thought through fully. So the first one was, how do we even build up to a lights out manufacturing facility? How do we build to this fully automated future? And is it even necessary? The second was, where are our most important assets and how do we equip humans to maximize the use of those important assets? The third, who owns, develops, and maintains these systems that drive this fully automated environment? If you're going to deploy automation across a facility, we didn't really think through lights out manufacturing, full automation, no humans. How do we manage and maintain those systems and get the maximum value from those systems? And finally, when is fully automated even realistic or necessary? It's not a one size fits all. We're going to talk a little bit here in the next couple slides that not every manufacturing facility is the same. Not everyone requires full automation. There's complexity that comes into play, and there's different use cases that it's appropriate and some that it's not. So let's move on and now talk about, a tangential or parallel environment that has gone through substantial change, the automotive industry and the idea of autonomous vehicles. We think this parallels, synergistic to what's happening in manufacturing and this whole concept of why Industry 4.0 hasn't panned out the way people expected. When autonomous vehicles were thought about, 10 years ago, when they started coming to fruition, companies were thinking, I'm going to go from level 0, which is no automation, manual control, human being driving a vehicle, to level 5, where it's fully automated, no longer humans are involved, no attention needed. What most companies have figured out in the automotive industry is that it's a gradual approach that you have to take. And the same thing applies in manufacturing. The idea of going from no automation to full automation, either A, may not make sense, or B, is not realistic. And you really need to take steps along the way. In the autonomous vehicle story, it's how do you go to level 1 and have some automation, give drivers assistance. And then maybe level 2 is now we're starting to have more monitoring by a human, but there's more automation by the vehicle. And then conditional automation, where maybe I can override what's occurred, to high automation, where maybe human override is still needed, and then ultimately to full automation. The same thing applies in the factory, and we're going to draw some parallels as we move forward here. So why are companies taking this gradual approach to automation? The first question you have to ask yourselves is, when and where do we really need fully autonomous cars? There are examples where this is occurring, but in every scenario, you want to think about what's the value prop, what's the risk, what are their safety concerns, can I actually fulfill the full automation? Do I still need human intervention to make changes or to adjust as you're seeing, changing conditions? So the same thing applies in the factory. When and where can I actually leverage full automation, and where is it centered around that human being? And the second question you have to ask yourselves is basically, who are the drivers in this quote unquote factory of the future analogy? Well, the driver in the vehicle is the operator. It's the person who's managing the vehicle, getting data, understanding, whether it be the UI experience of a map or conditions of the road or future problems they may find. So the driver in this case is the operator, and the analogy in the factory is the same. In most cases, that human, that frontline worker, that operator is so critical to the success of a manufacturing environment. So when you think about different degrees of automation and how they're appropriate to manufacturing, the first thing I would say is humans are very good at agility, learning, and dexterity. When you give them the tools, the data, the information, they learn very quickly. And why different degrees matter are every operation or every manufacturing environment can be different. You have some high mix, low volume manufacturing environments where the human is centered around how they manufacture. Maybe automation doesn't apply. You have new production lines that come about where maybe your process isn't optimized yet. You haven't driven to full efficiency, and that human can really help orchestrate how to manufacture that new good or service in a more traditional way or better way. Lines are changing. The customer demands are evolving, and as manufacturers, we have to constantly change how we manufacture. And again, that frontline worker is so integral in making those changes happen. And there are certain goods that are truly customized. They're built in a quantity of one for a individual customer. And in those cases, again, the human is so centered around, and maybe automation or limited automation may apply. So current challenges are amplifying the need to focus on worker augmentation. And there's two kind of buckets that we want to talk about here. The first is the labor market. It's not what it once was. When I talked about the reality of 2023, we do have a shortage of workers in manufacturing. They're staying a shorter period of time in terms of tenure, and they're turning over at a much higher rate than we've ever seen inside of manufacturing. So the first thing is the labor market is short. We have to make sure we can train people, that they can learn quickly and they can move within a facility and do a variety of tasks using a common platform. The second bucket is just really the fact that we have constant change is the new normal. You have situations of supply chain disruption, you have material shortages, and these are constantly putting pressure on manufacturers to sometimes be more productive, be more efficient, certainly less error prone, and basically do more with less or the same with less in that productivity and efficiency model. So when we talk about, the need for technology and this idea of maybe, lights out manufacturing is not necessarily, right solution for everyone. And we're in this journey of how to make the human frontline worker, more efficient, more productive, less error prone. We want to talk about Tulip and our platform, why we think it's an approach that companies can use to do that. The first is we are human-centric by nature. We have seamless workflows that drive the behavior we expect to get the right information at the right time so we can reduce errors and make that worker learn quickly and, again, be more productive, more efficient. We have a composable platform that allows you to build solutions that are right-sized and solve a problem. We'll talk later about monolithic traditional systems that are kind of one size fits all. Our view is you have a problem in manufacturing, you build an app or you have a solution for that particular problem and you solve it. Very open platform. So it's extensible, it's flexible. It allows you to connect to your systems, your devices, your people, and all the sensors and things that collect data that may be relevant to that frontline worker. And finally, we're enterprise ready. It's a platform that is cloud-based, but it has governance, it has the ability to scale and be performant for companies who have global operations. So just like the operator of a vehicle, the driver, we look at the operator on a manufacturing line or in a manufacturing facility, and we want to do the same thing that we're thinking about with an autonomous vehicle for the operator. How do we streamline their workflows to give them the right information at the right time to make sure they're given the guidance they need to do their job? That means connecting to the systems that are important to them to give them the right data at the right time. It's giving them things like pick-to-light guidance to eliminate errors, just like a vehicle can give guidance. Making sure we have data capture from a variety of data streams and harmonizing that data into one common platform and presenting it in an easy-to-use way for that frontline worker and giving them a user experience that's intuitive and aids them in their work processes. And think about their work processes, not just manufacturing. It can be any task that they have to do on a regular basis. We can help streamline that to make it easy for them to know what they have to do. Also to train new operators, and as operators move within a facility, they know how to use the system. So what we do is we help manufacturers elevate, their operations with the human in mind and adaptability in mind. So again, going back to this augmented operations, making sure they're more efficient, they're making fewer errors, and we're streamlining how they work. We're giving leaders data at the right time to make data-driven decisions. I always say you can collect a lot of data, but if you don't use that data and turn it into information that drives decisions, then it's just data. We try to provide that in a way that gives you the ability to make decisions in real time. And then giving engineers the tools they need to drive continuous improvement in their operations. We think that's critical. You see a problem, you solve it, you move on to the next problem. So how do we do that? We think about solving problems in your operational setting by getting value fast, focusing on your most critical challenges, and again, then moving on. You might start with guided workflows because that's the way to make sure you're streamlining the way an operator flows through their daily work. You might have a problem with quality and you want to think about quality defects and tracking. You might move on into things like production tracking and visibility because maybe you don't have that real-time visibility what's happening in your operations. And then you might want to do things that are outside kind of the normal manufacturing operations, asset management and performance, safety and compliance, audits and inspection. But the concept here is each one of these is an app or a solution that can be deployed very quickly that solves a very specific problem. And we'll talk about later this idea of versus a monolithic system where you get X amount of functionality, you might use 20% of it. In this scenario, we're basically saying solve that 20% with the solutions that best fit the needs of your environment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, who's going to talk about the total economic impact of Tulip from the research that Forrester did. Nikki, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikoletta Stergiou, and I'm a consultant on Forrester's Total Economic Impact team. I'm happy to be here today to talk about Forrester's TEI process and the findings of the report we created entitled Total Economic Impact of Tulip Frontline Operations Platform. So first, we'll discuss the TEI methodology. We'll go through some of the high-level findings, review the customer journey from the experiences shared by the interviewed organizations, and dive into the study results. So our TEI methodology is a method to understand the total business value that a service or solution provides an organization. And the objective is to identify all the factors that affect investment decisions. So in a ground-up manner, we identify 4 key components. First, we have benefits. These are the business advantages an organization gains by implementing a service or solution. Then we have costs, whether they be direct costs like fees that an organization pays for a solution, or indirect costs like internal labor for implementation. Forrester accounts for both of these kinds of costs. We also try, when possible, to take into account what we call flexibility. Flexibility is not an explicit benefit that a customer is currently experiencing, but it's the possibilities customers unlock for the future by having the solution in place today. Finally, all of this is risk adjusted. This helps us create a conservative and realistic view for any potential readers, accounting for the variability that there may be based on, for instance, size or vertical of the organization, and that is built into the model. So all of these together make up what we call the total economic impact, or TEI. So our project approach, we take several steps starting with our due diligence. First and foremost, we harness our internal knowledge that Forrester has through our research and speaking to analysts. This helps us understand what the product market is, and as well as what customers are looking for, what problems they're trying to solve, and why they're evaluating this technology. We then interviewed key stakeholders at Tulip to dive deeper into the solution. We then conduct 4 customer interviews to understand why the customers chose Tulip and their experience with the solution. And these customers would have had to have Tulip for at least 6 months. This is where we gathered the information and data for our model and case study. We then created a financial model around those interviewed organizations and wrote the case study about those customer experiences. So just as a disclosure before we get into the results of the study, the results discussed today are an abridged version of the full case study, which was commissioned by Tulip and delivered by Forrester Consulting. The customers' names were provided by Tulip, but we want to stress that Tulip did not participate in these customer interviews, nor were they on the calls or speaking with the customers in general. Forrester has maintained editorial control over the study, and Tulip could not change any metrics or findings. So as a quick overview of the overall impact that we learned after interviewing customers and creating the financial model, the composite organization experienced a return on investment of 448%, with benefits valuing at $19.85 million over the course of 3 years, which weighed against costs provide us with a net present value of $16.23 million over the course of 3 years. We shared a quote from one of the interviewees we spoke with regarding the impact that Tulip has had on their organization, and you can find more anecdotal quotes like this in the full study. So for this study, we created a composite organization from the 4 customers we interviewed. So this composite organization is a combination of characteristics of the interviewed organizations. So to represent an ideal customer profile, help simplify results, and to help keep the interviewees anonymous. For the purposes of the study, here are the key assumptions we made to create our financial model. The composite organization is a manufacturing organization with $5 billion in annual revenue and 10,000 employees. The organization has 1,000 Tulip stations across 20 manufacturing sites. It operates 2 8-hour shifts per day and has a 10% defect rate. So some of the key challenges that we learned from customers that led them to search for a solution like Tulip were a couple of things. So first, manual processes in the prior environment were complex and error-prone, which limited scalability. This impacted efficiency on production lines, including the speed that production lines could run and product quality. And one customer included an example of a low-volume production line, which required operators to review a couple thousand pages of work instructions and a couple hundred pages of manual documentation, which ultimately limited the potential to scale to greater output. Another challenge that customers faced in their prior environments were inflexible systems, such as manufacturing execution systems, enterprise resource planning systems, and quality management systems. These systems were generally not user-friendly for operators and were often complex, which required coding skills from scarce IT resources. So with the investment in Tulip, the interviewed organizations were able to meet some investment objectives that they had. So one of their objectives was to digitize workflows to increase the speed of impact and reduce the number of errors in production. Customers cited the desire to become automated and paperless on their shop floors. Another key objective was becoming more flexible in supporting different groups across the organization, including standardizing methods across different locations and processes, especially in situations where the organization was heavy in M&A activity. And finally, providing real-time data was critical to better understand current business processes. Tulip apps enable the interviewed customers to make immediate decisions on their production lines. So here's a high-level overview of the benefits we quantified in our financial model, the composite for the composite organization. We'll dive deeper into these in the next few slides, but among these listed, improved efficiencies with Tulip was the biggest contributor, followed by increased savings through improved quality and avoided third-party costs. So the first benefit we quantified was the improvement in efficiencies with Tulip. So these improvement in efficiencies that customers experienced are related to the automation that the platform provides and digitization of the processes, which mitigates the lift on operators and streamlines oversight for manufacturing managers. Some use case examples include digitizing work instructions, inventory management, production monitoring, and data contextualization. Over time, these efficiencies exponentially scale as the number of use cases increase with more use of the Tulip platform. Some examples from our interviewees which support this benefit include, well, first, an increase in the speed of output, quality, assembly, transparency, and training employees on an assembly line through digitized work instructions by half a year. A second example includes the reduction in physical inventory tracking processes at a manufacturing company by 40% through the digitization with Tulip. A third example includes a 75% reduction in time in digitizing processes of reviewing logbooks at a pharmaceutical company. So as a result of eliminating manual processes and workarounds due to inflexible off-the-shelf solutions, the composite organization experienced an improvement in efficiencies, including a 15% increase in direct labor and a 50% increase in indirect labor with the deployment of Tulip. The composite organization also assumes an 80% productivity recapture to account for an enhanced employee experience, as increased efficiencies lead to additional breaks and less overtime. Total efficiencies by the end of year 3 result in $17 million in present value. So another benefit that we quantified was avoided third-party costs, which include third-party consulting and vendor software costs across some of the composite organization's manufacturing sites. Apps implemented with Tulip replace these third-party activities as the platform provides flexibility to standardize processes across sites that were previously outsourced. So the most notable example from the director of digital transformation at a manufacturing company was eliminating a third-party vendor contract with a Tulip dashboard, which automatically collected data, saving the customer $21,000 annually. The composite organization replaced third-party support across 5 manufacturing sites, leading to $25,000 avoided third-party costs per manufacturing site. By the end of year 3, this results in $264,000 in present value. So we also quantified an increase in savings through improved quality. So interviewees discussed this by identifying root causes of errors with Tulip. So with clear visibility to the root cause, interviewed organizations were able to intervene quickly to identify and mitigate problems on the production lines. And as a result, the interviewed organizations experienced overall savings in material costs and direct labor associated with rework and defects. Some examples from our interviewees which support this benefit include reducing rework on a pre-assembly line at a manufacturing company through digitizing quality gates and checkpoints, which resulted in $11,000 in savings within the first year of implementing Tulip. A second example includes a 70% reduction in defects in finished goods at a medical device company within 17 months of implementing Tulip. A third example includes reducing the number of discarded batches at a pharmaceutical company, as data visibility allowed the customer to be more proactive and avoid errors. The composite organization experienced a 70% reduction in defects with the deployment of Tulip, in addition to avoiding 12 direct labor hours per defect per month and 10 hours of indirect labor hours per defect per month. With the assistance of a scrap application, the composite organization also saves $1 million by the end of year 3 in our model. The total savings by the end of the year 3 result in $2.6 million in present value. So in addition to the benefits we just reviewed, customers also experience benefits beyond the model, which provide significant value to the investment in Tulip. So first, there's this increased scalability through edge native connectivity and additional systems integration. This benefit was described as interviewees could easily connect the platform with machines, devices, and sensors to automatically gather data and insights and integrate with current systems and tools. Another benefit that customers experienced was avoided downtime, compliance, and audit costs. And these were experienced as a result of Tulip's digital tracking, which reduced compliance and audit risks through automated processes. The impact at a manufacturing company was $50,000 in savings in being able to track uptime and downtime with Tulip, for example. With the interviewed organizations that we spoke with, they also expressed how no-code platform enables the digital culture of citizen development, where operators could address issues on the front line immediately using Tulip library apps for common use cases, creating new apps for unique use cases, and accessing educational complementary resources and support from the Tulip team. Interviewees also described the potential increase in revenue as a result of increased throughput as organization labor capacity increased with the use of Tulip. An interviewee from a medical device company noted that the increase in capacity at their organization increased by 40 to 45% with the use of Tulip over the course of 2 years. Another benefit that customers noted was this avoided future costs of app development, where interviewees compared the costs of alternative solutions such as homegrown or legacy systems to begin their digitization journey and found Tulip to be more cost-effective in the long run. And for their long-term strategy, interviewees also highlighted that Tulip has this improvement through ongoing software updates that are an integral part of maintaining quality and standards as they continue to move forward in their digitization journey. So these are the 3-year risk-adjusted costs that we reviewed with customers. These include subscription and licensing fees and internal implementation and training costs for users. And just to revisit the key results over a 3-year period, we have a 448% ROI or return on investment for the composite organization and $16.23 million in net present value. Before we conclude, I would encourage all listeners to take a look at the study itself and build a framework for their organization based on that. So with that, I'll hand the floor back to Jason.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for that analysis and all the work that you did with our customers to pull that data together. So as we go into section 3, we're going to focus more on why we believe a platform approach enables rapid and lasting value. And it kind of ties back to the TEI, the overall impact that we see with our customers. We believe that the platform approach enables that, not only in the short term to get value quickly, as we'll talk about, but also over the life of the use of a platform like Tulip. So let's start with traditional systems. I sometimes call them monolithic systems and why they fail. And we kind of highlight 3 areas of focus on why we believe these systems fail. Poor adoption, certainly from an engagement standpoint, not potentially being user-friendly to the operator, not focused on that frontline worker. Difficult to maintain, not only the implementation that we'll talk about on the next slide, but also the long-term total cost of ownership and lack of scalability. And I'll talk about the third one in a little bit more detail. Most systems that are provided in the market that are off the shelf, again, they have a set of key functionality. That functionality may or may not apply to your needs. You may be buying a solution that has, 100% functionality that you're going to consume 15 or 20%. And even that 15 or 20%, you end up having to customize it substantially to make it fit for your process. There's also no way to capture and use best practices. What we find in most of these solutions, because they're on-prem or they're not maintained centrally, you have the first site deploys these customizations, they solve a problem. Now you go to site 2, there's additional point solutions that were created. Now all of a sudden you have 2 different environments, and the same thing applies across all of your locations. And that feeds back into this idea of difficult to maintain and that long-term total cost of ownership issue. On this next slide, what we talk about here is this concept of why we think that their value diminishes over time for some of the reasons I just noted. The first thing I would highlight is the time to get live. A lot of these solutions, we kind of show a 12-month mark for companies to get these solutions live. In many cases, it's 12 to 18 months until companies are starting to be live and starting to get value from those solutions. And they spend a long time in deployment through a very traditional, deployment process. Now you go live. Now you find you have gaps. You have to build ad hoc solutions. You have data silos. You're doing some upgrades along the way. You're building in point solutions to fill gaps. And over time, you by the time you've gone live and spent that 12 to 18 months, you're now already seeing the value of that solution diminish for the reasons we said, in the previous slide: adoption, maintainability, scalability, and overall just the deployment cycle that has to happen from site to site. You're losing value each time you're moving to that next site. So we believe there's a new approach that's needed to take advantage of the latest technology while focusing and empowering the frontline worker, the frontline operations. And we believe that new approach involves the way Tulip can be deployed. Now, embracing this new approach requires shifts in ownership, culture, and technology. So let's start with the shift in kind of ownership. We want the work of building solutions to be closer to those who know the process best. The people who know where the problems are also know how to solve those problems. It's a faster, more effective, human-centric solution approach by those who know that process best. So think about, you see a quality problem, you want to put the people who know how to solve that problem, you want to put technology in their hands to go do it. Then there's a change in culture, thinking more agile and empowered. This idea of iterative development, kind of fail fast, solve a problem, and then iterate and make it better over time. It reduces the risk associated with changes in production. It certainly enables resilience, agility, and a faster time to value. And certainly the TEI results show our main focus is getting you value as quickly as possible. And then the creation of an ecosystem and thinking about how do you leverage capabilities and technology from a variety of not only Tulip library apps or solutions built on Tulip, but the entire ecosystem that feeds into the Tulip platform. That allows you to extend solutions, not only using pre-built elements and integrations, but really it's freeing organizations to build the stack they need now and tomorrow. Again, focusing on problems and solving those quickly. So what does it mean to have a solution built inside of Tulip? We have a drag and drop interface that allows you to quickly build applications. You can embed a variety of pieces of data or embedded video, CAD, et cetera, to make it easy for an operator to do their job. Very flexible and transparent data model. And the whole idea of no code is this idea of if-then logic that triggers actions. So instead of having to write C#, JavaScript, whatever it may be, through our drag and drop interface, through the use of triggers with if-then statements, you can have little to no coding background and build an application inside of Tulip and get it deployed to solve one of your problems that you're finding in your manufacturing environment. This is a quote from one of the folks who went through the study from the manufacturing of a medical device. And it kind of goes to citizen development. We're not taking a long time to make a change. If we see an opportunity for improvement, we do it instantaneously. And I think that's the spirit of citizen development. That's the spirit of composability. And it's certainly the spirit of continuous improvement that we want to foster within our organizations that use Tulip. So what does it mean to be agile and to have, applications or solutions that solve problems? With Tulip, our whole philosophy is most companies start with a use case they know they have an issue with, and maybe that's in the pilot form, and it's a known problem in the dark blue. Your existing systems may or may not be able to fulfill the needs of the known problems, but let's assume they do. As you're either replacing or augmenting those solutions with Tulip applications, you're starting to solve those problems problem by problem. And the good news with Tulip is as you're deploying those for those known problems, you're also going to find things that you didn't even know were a problem and now you need to solve for. So our whole strategy is build what you need, roll it out fast, and then adjust accordingly as needed to continue to get value. The whole idea for us is, again, use the technology to solve those problems and do it in a rapid fashion and get value from it as quickly as possible. Over that period of time, you'll see your existing systems go away and replacing with these solutions that meet the needs of your environment. Another quote from one of the customers interviewed, 3 to 6 months for implementation and deployment process for Tulip, depending on the size of the organization. The reason I want to highlight this is, again, on the very first slide, we talked about why we believe when you deploy a traditional system, you immediately start losing value, not only because of the fact that you're having diminishing returns, but it took you 12 to 18 months to get deployed, and you probably spent a multiplier factor of your licensing cost on systems integration. Our whole view is we want you live and getting value in 3 to 6 months. We have customers who've done it faster than that, but our focal point is that speed and agility to get you value so that you have that ROI that you've been presented from Forrester in this report. The other thing that we like to highlight with Tulip is it works with what you have today and what you might have tomorrow. So let me just go through this kind of architecture a little bit. The Tulip platform is sitting in the center, and the 4 areas around it for us are the key things that drive value. On the top left, it's the idea that when you build a solution inside of Tulip or deploy a library application in Tulip, you have the flexibility to deploy that on any interface, including tablets, mobile, wearables, fixed workstations. So we make it easy for that frontline worker to leverage the application, to have the data represented in a way that's easy for them to use and to guide them through their workflows. On the bottom left, this idea of connecting to many things. It's important that we have connectivity, certainly to your PLCs, your machinery, your devices, your sensors, cameras, other edge, via edge devices and other, protocols that we have as part of our platform to make it easy for the data you need to present to an operator to be available when it needs to be available. On the top right, we've already talked about the fact that we have a no-code platform to easily build solutions. We also have the idea to extend Tulip with low-code widgets. So you can build those in-house or by third parties as part of our full ecosystem of partners to build specialized components that are unique to your environment that are now part of the Tulip platform when you deploy. And then finally, and we think this is critical, there is no production system or manufacturing system that can be complete without making sure that we're able to integrate to the third-party solutions that are important to you, whether that be your ERP, your CRM, your PLM system, the historians that you have. Maybe you have an existing MES where Tulip is going to augment that. We like to talk about Tulip as an and solution, not an or. So it's not rip and replace what you have and then put in Tulip. Tulip a lot of times becomes an augmentation to make the operator experience better, even with underlying environments that you already have in place. So our whole focal point is give you the tools you need to solve problems now, but make sure that you have a platform that will solve your needs in the future. Another quote, Tulip's real power is harnessed when you do that connectivity to your ERP, your PLM, your quality system, and eventually CRM. It kind of goes to the point I just made. You can certainly build and deploy Tulip solutions that are not integrated or not connected to things, and they still have a ton of value just to guide operators through potentially an assembly process or safety rounds, as I talked about. But when we find the customers who take it to the next level and really get value to the nth degree from Tulip, it's when we start making sure the integration story is solid, and we're not only integrating to your systems, but we're integrating people and all the other things that are important for data collection. So my final slide, some key takeaways. If you remember a few things from this, hopefully you do. Full automation isn't the end goal for all environments. And even when it is, partial automation is a critical step, elevating operations now. What we mean by this, it kind of goes back to the autonomous vehicles. It comes back to the idea of lights out manufacturing. You have to pick and choose where automation is going to help you. You have to think about the person who's going to leverage the data and the inputs. But it's not for everyone, and not every site or not every even part of a site requires that. And you can still get value from technology. The second thing is human-centric solutions are certainly, in our opinion, critical to help manufacturers drive value with improvements to efficiency, quality, and eliminating point solutions. And I look at this also as, the people who are using the technology know best what the problems are, and they can give guidance on how to solve those problems. And then finally, by implementing these solutions with a platform approach, manufacturers can avoid pitfalls, including the things we talked around: adoption, maintenance, scalability. We certainly believe in our platform and believe that a platform approach, regardless of what technology you go with, needs to be able to solve your current problems as well as be ready for future needs within your environment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen and let her take us home.
Awesome. So before we jump into the Q&A session, of course, I've seen a lot of questions come in, which is great. I just want to talk through a webinar that we have coming up in a couple of weeks now. So this webinar is around demystifying this idea of composability that I know Jason mentioned a few times. Also, if you've read the recent Gartner Magic Quadrant report for MES, they talk a little bit about composability. And so as a platform approach that we have at Tulip, we have a unique perspective on composability and what works and what doesn't work. And so during this webinar, Eric, Miranda, and then Gilad Klinger will be talking through kind of why composability is important, like different types of composability and what we really want to strive for, and then also some examples for the customers. So that's coming up on June 13th. And now we'll move over to questions. So we have a question here: is my company is a different size than the one that you discussed? How can I apply these learnings to my company?
Sure. So that's a very common question we get regarding the TEI analysis. So if your company is a different size or industry than the ones we discussed today, the benefit results are really a percentage of improvements that are applicable across the organizations of different sizes. So you can take this framework and insert your own organizational demographics to similarly produce results for your investment in Tulip. And you can look at benefits described in the study and evaluate which benefits are most applicable to your organization to review what kind of impact that it might have on your organization specifically. And we try to be as comprehensive as possible with our analysis on findings because we understand how benefits may resonate more strongly with some organizations than others.
Yeah, and all I would add is, from Tulip's perspective, one of our unique value props is we service large enterprises as well as SMBs because of the nature of being cloud native, the ability for someone to start small and start to get value. So we look at one of our real value props is, we don't discriminate on size of company, and we think there's value regardless of the manufacturing setting you're in, how you produce, and whatever size or complexity of your operations. We think you can start small regardless and start to get value.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So next question here is changes to the app are made by manufacturing employees or IT? Does IT feel like they're losing control? I'll give that to you, Jason.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've talked a lot, over the last couple of years around IT/OT convergence. We think actually Tulip helps make IT/OT convergence a reality. Certainly, there are organizations where IT drives the deployment of Tulip, and any application deployment or application development can be led by IT. There are other organizations where it really is, given to the manufacturing operations team, those quality engineers, those manufacturing engineers, or line supervisors who are uniquely qualified to solve a problem. But what we find the best companies are where the IT and OT are converging together to drive not only what are the problems we want to solve, how do we prioritize those problems, how do we prioritize applications, and how do we have the proper governance on making sure that we're deploying these, in a proper way. So to the second question, I would say at times in those companies where manufacturing, employees are driving the majority of deployment, there is a sense that at times IT feels like they're distanced from it. But like I said, I think in our best organizations, there's a really good convergence of both parties on how to deploy and get value from Tulip together.
So a question here, can you please describe the TEI customer interview process in more detail?
Sure. So the customer interviews, they're an hour-long conversation with the clients. Tulip introduced us to who we were going to speak with, but Tulip, as a client, did not participate in these interviews to keep the conversations authentic and ensure anonymous data collection, and for the sake of the customers, to ensure that they're comfortable sharing whatever it is that they're experiencing with the platform. And we provide an interview guide in advance so that customers are able to gather data points if needed.
Perfect. And then just a follow-up question, or question for you, Nikki, is can you explain again why Forrester makes risk adjustments to the benefits?
Yeah, so risk adjustments, I think we might all agree that there's risk inherent with any technology. So in an effort to present reasonable expectations, achievable and credible benefits, and ROI totals, Forrester considers risk adjustments to put a risk downward adjustment on these benefits. Forrester did not risk adjust costs because amidst the costs being fixed from Tulip, the risk-adjusted benefits still produce a risk-adjusted 448% return on investment. So it's a very compelling business case that raises confidence that the investment is likely to succeed because the risks that threaten the project have been taken into consideration and quantified. So the risk-adjusted number should be taken as realistic expectations for an investment in Tulip.
Was increased yield throughput not considered part of the benefits?
So we did consider increased yield throughput, and we did hear that there was an increase in yield, but in terms of quantifying it based on the organizations we spoke to, it was difficult because of the variance in what they were yielding and how they defined value for that. So it varied industry by industry.
Okay, and then question for Jason, what is the first use case people typically implement with Tulip?
Yeah, it really does vary depending on, what problems they're trying to solve. But what I would say is, the majority of our customers certainly do digitized work instructions, guided workflows for the operators. And when we say operators in this case, it could be that they're assembling something or machining something, or it could be that it's tasks that they have to do on some consistent basis that are important to the business. Again, safety rounds, line inspection, line audits, logbooks, et cetera. So I think that the primary thing that we see is guiding that frontline worker to be the most efficient, most productive, and least error prone that they can possibly be. After that, it tends to start to become production visibility is certainly a key. We see a lot of machine performance, machine monitoring, downtime management, a lot of quality tracking. Certainly with our workflow capabilities, a lot of it also is triggering off, things happen in production. We had an event. Now, how do we go solve for that event? So those are the types of things that we see, but I would say guided work instructions, guided workflows is primary.
Perfect. And then question for Nikki, how do you quantify the future value? Do you have future values in relation to the present value?
So one thing we consider in our studies is this concept of flexibility, which lies beyond the 3-year period that we're looking at in our study, because we're taking the value across the 3 years and apply a discount rate to see what present value the benefits are in year 2 and in year 3. So similar to specific use cases you heard earlier about how some organizations could conduct more revenue in the future. For Tulip, that may mean new ways with which to use applications built into their platform that impact the business. So it hasn't been quantified today by the customers that you spoke to, but they anticipate that it would hold value for the company in the future.
Perfect. Thank you. Question here, Jason. Any specific features for automotive industry, like QMS for FMEA, control planes, IATF compliance standards, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say, for us, automotive is an industry that we are focused on. We do have customers who are doing some failure mode and analysis already, trying to build control plans inside of Tulip. What I would say is, from a product roadmap standpoint, this might be something we follow up on with you directly to talk about what we're thinking about there. That'll be more specific, but I will say that for the automotive customers we have, they are using Tulip to build applications or build solutions that do, cover at least some of the FMEA stuff, as well as some control plans. But beyond that, I think we'll kind of direct you to our product management team from a roadmap perspective to give you a little bit more color on what's on the docket.
All right, Nikki, I have a question here. Was there anything unexpected or surprising about the results from the study? And maybe Jason, you can chime in too.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it was surprising for me to see the range of use cases with which customers use Tulip. So ahead of the customer interviews, we understood it was a flexible tool, but hearing firsthand from the customers how it impacts all aspects of their work and really transform their processes was unexpected.
And all I would add is, I knew we were driving value for people. I think in some of the results, I think we were all surprised with the level of value people were getting pretty quickly. I think that, obviously we're in business to help people, generate value, but I think we were also a little, overwhelmed and feeling very, great and positive about the results that we were hearing from those individual customers.
And then a question for you, Jason. So can Tulip build apps directly from a smartphone?
Yeah, so you can build apps from any browser. What I would say is from a user experience standpoint, you only have so much limited, surface area on a phone. I don't think we recommend typically people to build apps unless they're going to be, pretty straightforward, simple apps. You can certainly do it because it is browser based, and you can log into a browser from your phone and start firing away. But I would say the most effective way is through a more traditional, workstation or tablet where you have a little bit more surface area and a little bit more, capability to see all the components that you can bring into an application.
And we have a Tulip player that's available on Android and then iOS as well. So you can download it and display the apps on any mobile device or tablet.
Yeah, that's right. We have native apps, so when an app is developed, it can run on as an iOS app itself or Android.
Perfect. So I think we can close out the webinar. So thank you very much, Jason. Thank you very much, Nikki, for presenting today. And thank you for everyone for attending and asking questions. Look forward to catching you guys on a future webinar, and have a great day.